Welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show for July 28th. It is Monday here in Canada. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I am guest hosting for Candice today. Thank you so much for making us a part of your very busy day. We've got kind of a doozy happening this week in Canada. Something blew up over the weekend. I just wanted to touch on it briefly because it speaks to things like freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. And Juno News and True North are going to be covering it very closely as the week rolls on. So before I get to my colleague Franco Terrazzano, stationed in Ottawa, talking about the electric vehicle forcification and the ban on gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles, I wanted to touch on this briefly. So there is an American Christian singer person. His name is Sean. I believe the last name is Foyt. I can't pronounce it properly, so forgive me for wrecking it there. All that is to say, I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of Canadians had no idea who this person was before a huge fuss was kicked up, largely over the weekend is when it blew up. What gets me from a taxpayer's angle is a couple of things. One, we've got the government-funded media, the state broadcaster, apparently following this performer around Eastern Canada, kind of tailing him. I will remind people that the CBC is getting $1.4 billion from taxpayers this year. And also, no matter what political ideology you come from, journalists shouldn't be paid by the government, period. So there's an expense there. But from a freedom of assembly and free expression angle, which is essential, like we couldn't do what we are doing here. Like we couldn't do the Juno News thing. We couldn't do the True North thing. We couldn't be Taxpayers Federation fighters that, embarrass politicians and, say that they're pigs at the trough if we didn't have free expression in this country. If we don't have that, we can't fight for things like lower taxes and less waste and more accountable government. Like, period. It stops there. So I would just try to, as former US President Ronald Reagan used to like to say, reach across the aisle and remind some folks who are up in arms and trying to ban this person from, singing at churches and stuff and holding concerts. Imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. Like, would you want local city governments trying to ban Greta Thunberg from speaking? I believe Greta Thunberg had a huge rally where she spoke right on the Edmonton legislature grounds. And if people want to show up and listen to her speak and rail about anti-oil and gas all day, they have the right to do that. Like, that should just be an obvious thing for Canadians to go to be able to listen to. You don't have to agree with it, which is the entire purpose of freedom of expression. You wouldn't need it written down in a big old charter if people just agreed with what everybody else was saying all the time. And so I did want to touch on this basically as a programming note for Juno and True North going forward this week. Also, I will mention we spoke with Christine Van Geyn last week, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, and I think that they are kicking the tires on this one pretty hard too. They're the constitutional lawyers, smarty pants people. So definitely go follow their work on this as well. So stay tuned for that when it comes to things, basic things like freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. Speaking of freedom, there's something that is coming down the rail here really fast and hard on Canadians, and we really wanted to highlight it, okay? And that is the looming ban on the sale of normal gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles. A lot of folks think this is happening, in a galaxy far, far away in a future time. That's not true, okay? This doesn't just start happening in 10 years. It starts happening in 5 months, okay? The restrictions start kicking in 5 months, meaning that if you are a car dealership, okay? Imagine them in your hometown, in your cities, how important they are, especially for the local economy. If you're a car dealership, 20% of your new vehicle sales, according to the government, will have to be battery-powered vehicles. Hybrids don't count. For folks who are like, oh, I love my gas and, battery-powered hybrid. They don't get credit for those. So 20% of their new vehicle sales going off the lot starting in 5 months are going to have to be wholly electric. This is going to really throw a spanner in the works when it comes to our auto industry, meaning it's going to screw up how much supply we actually have of gas and diesel powered vehicles. And it's going to make all of these battery powered vehicles, if nobody's buying them, pile up at these car dealerships. Then these car sellers have to get entangled with this crazy, complicated federal credit program with the government where they can like earn points for however many vehicles they sell and then get back credit if they don't sell them. Like, it just reeks of a boondoggle, okay? Like, the federal government blew billions of dollars, billions with a B, setting up their own payroll software program. To issue checks to pay for their own employees. They couldn't figure that out properly without blowing billions of dollars. Can you imagine how they're going to spend your money trying to set up this complicated, crazy credit system while telling you what kind of vehicle you can and cannot drive here in this country? Think about, if you own a vehicle, how much you depend on it, what it provides for you. As somebody who, worked in the industry in radio for a long time, right? You're up in the dark, right? You're leaving work at dark. You're working strange hours. You're going out into the boonies to cover things. Like, the idea of not having my own personal, safe, warm, locking vehicle that can get me out of places and into places, I can't even imagine trying to live my life and actually do my work without my vehicle. So your vehicle might be that important to you too. Imagine now the government deciding to say, you know what? We've decided what kind of vehicle that can be. That's nuts. Number one. Number two, we don't have the money for this. Like, we do not have the cash for this as a government, both federally and provincially. So, very quick math. If Santa Claus came along and magically changed everybody's personal vehicles that they already own, like our private fleet, as they call it here in Canada, poof, they're all electric cars, we would need 14 huge new can-do type reactors. Like those big ones that you see in Darlington and Pickering and stuff in Ontario. We'd need 14 of them. Those things cost around $13 billion each. And they take more than a decade to build each. So, like, the scale of this is off the charts. The federal government itself commissioned a report and shows that this could cost close to $300 billion. So this is crazy from a small government freedom to choose what kind of vehicle you want to drive and buy angle. And also, we do not have the energy or the money for this. So how are they actually going to make this work? Let's find out. Joining me now is Franco Terrazzano. He is the federal director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, also a very good friend of mine. He is stationed in Mordor, also known as Ottawa. Franco, we were just talking about, government getting huge and bossy and up in your grill about pretty much everything here in this country lately. And one of the big ones that really stuck out to, I think, all of us over the last couple of years was this looming ban on the sale of what I would call normal gasoline and diesel powered vehicles, new ones off the lot. Now, for some folks, they're like, oh, that's only happening in 10 years or so. Or that was a Trudeau thing. Like, no, 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 no. These restrictions are kicking in very soon. They're going to start tightening the belt on everybody. Also, as far as we can tell, Carney's still going full steam ahead with Trudeau's crazy plan to ban the sale of gas and diesel powered vehicles and force people to purchase battery powered vehicles instead. Where do we stand on this? Like, what kind of money are we spending federally? I wanted to take on Ontario Premier Doug Ford in a minute here, but just give us a bit of a national overview as far as this is concerned so far.
Well, no, it looks like the government is still going forward with its plans to ban new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. Right. But actually the mandate, these bans is really starting next year where, 20% of the new vehicles sold have to be electric. And then you'll see tightening restrictions over the years until 2035, where it's just a ban on new gas and diesel vehicles. Right. And look, the federal government in Ottawa does a whole bunch of crazy things. This might be the most ridiculous thing that they've hatched up. I mean, this is absolutely bonkers. Okay. The costs of this are going to be outrageous. Number one, where do these politicians get off telling you what type of car that you can drive? Okay, number one. Number two, if you're looking at the dollars and cents, beep boop, this is nuts. Okay, one report showed that Canada's electric vehicle transition could cost up to $300 billion. So you're looking at tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars cost. And like, where are we going to get the electricity, the power requirements for this? Well, look, I think every Canadian right now, if you set aside the personal freedom issue, which is just an absolutely huge issue, you have to be asking yourself, like, how much is your tax and power bill going to go up to pay for all the subsidies, infrastructure, transmission lines, charging stations for this absolute boondoggle?
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And that report that Franco just mentioned, guys, this was not from some kind of far-flung out there group. It was commissioned by the federal government. Like, it is on the federal government's website. I think it's Natural Resources. I think they've also mirrored it over at Transport Canada, where they're estimating it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars with a B. And the reason for that is largely what Franco just pointed out. It's where are we getting the juice from? Where are we going to build all these transmission stations? Like, picture all the different gas stations you see, like in your own hometown. Imagine all of those having to become like plug-in stations. Like, we do not have the cash for this. And I need to keep pointing this out. We have unmoney. It's not as if we're, it's not as if we're Norway and we're rolling in it. And we've got this huge heritage fund backing us up where we can choose to do what kind of vision quest we want to do with electric vehicles. We don't have the cash for this at the federal level, do we?
No, the government is broke, right? I mean, look, interest charges on the federal debt alone are costing taxpayers more than $1 billion every week. Well, what's $1 billion, right? That's a brand new hospital that is not getting built every single week because the government is so broke and so in debt, and all that money is going to interest charges, right? Think about it this way. All right, think about this every time you're at the cashier, right, waiting to check out. Well, every dollar you paid in federal sales tax last year went to pay interest charges on the debt. So the government is absolutely broke. I mean, think about the billions of dollars that the government is going to put taxpayers on the hook for the subsidies, for all the new infrastructure, for all the new transmission lines, right? I mean, look, the government has already put taxpayers on the hook for about $30 billion in corporate welfare to multinational corporations like Honda, Volkswagen, Stellantis, and Northvolt so they can build EV battery factories. And that's just the federal government, right? Let alone the Ontario government, some of the other provincial governments who are getting into the corporate welfare game. And we mentioned that Natural Resource Canada report, where the total cost of this could be up to $300 billion. Like, think about the electricity or the power requirements for this, Kris. We had an op-ed in the Toronto Sun about this a little while ago, where we talk about, Canada would need 14 large nuclear reactors to power all those electric vehicles. Like, the only silver lining from this absolutely crazy idea, this ban, the only silver lining is that it's so crazy, it might not even be possible, right? It's just so out there.
Yeah, it's kind of like, let's go live on Mars in a year. It's like, okay, that sounds fun. Maybe sit down, as my kids like to say. Maybe sit down. Speaking of nuclear reactors, the big can-do nuclear reactors, which is what we would need 14 of, just for the private vehicle fleet that is owned in Canada right now. That's not touching trucking. That's not touching commercial transportation needs, okay? 14 big can-do reactors. Where are those located? Right where you're sitting right now, or a little south of you, in Ontario. So I wanted to flag this from a provincial perspective because, man, Ontario Premier Doug Ford does not know which way he's going half the time. I wanted to play this clip because I don't understand it. He's talking about getting rid of the mandate now, I guess, but still spending taxpayers' money on corporate welfare, even though there isn't a demand for it or something. He reminds me of the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz, where he's pointing both directions. Let's listen to this most recent clip from Ford.
The regulations being pointed out is the EV mandate. What does today's announcement, how does that affect your past enthusiasm to develop battery plants in Ontario as well as have EVs manufactured in Ontario?
Well, I always believe I'm a big proponent of the market dictates. The market will dictate, not governments will dictate. We have to get rid of these mandates. The companies won't be able to meet their targets. And let's continue investing. I'm confident that eventually the EV sector per se will continue growing. But right now, the people are going to decide. But let's not slow down on building the battery plants and any other EV plants. But who knows this the best but the auto sector? and they'll determine that, but we're going to continue investing in the market itself.
Okay, so my brain hurts. Could you please explain, what does he mean by investing? Like, when government says invest, do they just mean spend?
No, they mean take your money and give it out in corporate welfare, right? They mean take your tax dollars that you work so hard for, right? And then give that money to multinational corporations. I mean, we saw that. I talked about, the tens of billions of dollars that the federal government has put taxpayers on the hook for. Well, Ford, Ontario Premier Ford, was clapping along, all too happy to also give Ontario taxpayers money to some of these multinational corporations for battery factories. So, like, what is Ford talking about? At one point, he also says, let the market decide. Well, I mean, his own government has been handing out corporate welfare to these multinational corporations. So, why is Ford running around trying to play investment banker with taxpayers' money? Look, all this corporate welfare gets me so riled up because it's ordinary Canadians, ordinary Ontarians who work so hard, and the government is taking their money, turning it around, and giving it to hand-picked corporations. And like, think of the small businesses, right, who are paying massive taxes that now they're funding with their own tax dollars, potentially their competitors in the marketplace. Like, look, these politicians at Queen's Park or at Parliament Hill, they couldn't balance the budget of a lemonade stand. Okay, if these people were such good investment bankers, they wouldn't be politicians or bureaucrats. They would be spending their own money in the marketplace. Like, corporate welfare is such a bad deal for ordinary Canadians who are forced to pick up this tab. So if we could be as charitable as possible, I guess it's good that Ford is, speaking out against the government's ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles. But, like, come on, he's part of the problem when we're talking about all this massive and costly corporate welfare.
Like, I don't have my master's in economics or anything, but isn't it kind of a contradiction in terms for him to say, let the market decide? And then in the next breath, let's keep piling in more corporate welfare. Isn't that the opposite of letting the market decide? Isn't that putting your big government thumb on the scale?
Oh, of course it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite, right? Like, look, I know, Kris, me and you, like, we're all about capitalism, right? Where it's entrepreneurs who have their skin in the game and invest their own money to hopefully get a profit or suffer the losses, right? That's what the free market is. The free market is not a bunch of politicians and bureaucrats who rely or who live off the taxpayer, then take taxpayers' money and give it to a couple hand-picked corporations. Like, come on.
Yeah, that is a total mess. It is so gross. I really hope that he's able to kind of formulate and focus his thoughts and have it follow that, yes, that's good that you're now against forcing people to buy a certain type of vehicle and that you're going to stand up to Ottawa and tell Carney no. That's great. Mention that the next time you're at the cottage and you're having a fireside chat, as he described it in the next breath. That's fine. But also, you need to cancel the corporate welfare, because at the end of the day, the fact that the Americans, who are an enormous market, right? Like, we have an integrated auto market. For anyone who's paid any attention to cross-border trade in the last 50 years, we have an integrated auto market. If their production and demand has now shifted away from a mandate for battery-powered vehicles, the Biden administration had a very similar sort of mandate that the Trudeau administration had. They gone. Trump is the president now, and he canceled that. The fact that we're still going to pretend that we can limp this along in the Canada's size of a population and market for our auto industry, like, it just makes my taxpayer wallet like cringe. Speaking of taxes, I wanted to shift gears here. Sorry, I got full of mom puns this morning. I wanted to shift gears here to the biggest bite that's taken out of our wallet. And every year, the good folks over at the Fraser Institute do a big calculation where they figure out how much we're paying in taxes, fees, levies, and all the other euphemisms that politicians at the trough use for taxes. What's the bite this year? How much of our income is being sucked up in taxes?
Oh, it's more than 42%. It's absolutely disgusting that the average family is paying almost half of their income to the tax man, all levels of government. Okay, so think about it this way, folks, right? Like, take half your paycheck, rip it in half, because that half is the tax man. And like, look, like, the biggest cost for your family, it's not food, it's not clothing, it's not housing, it's taxes, right? So taxes are taken away about 42% of the average family's budget. Meanwhile, an average family is spending 36% of their income on food, housing, and clothing. So think about it one more way. You're paying more of your money in taxes, or the government is taking more of your money in taxes than what you're spending on food, housing, and clothing combined. Combined. So Canadians are being taxed to death, right? You have federal income taxes, provincial income taxes, federal sales taxes, provincial sales taxes, federal gas taxes, provincial gas taxes, carbon taxes, payroll taxes, federal business taxes, provincial business taxes, capital gains taxes. And if all that drives you to drink, well, too bad, because you're paying alcohol taxes to both levels of government as well.
And a whole bunch of crazy hidden fees all amongst that, which is what the Fraser Institute calculates, and they do a great job. Sean, pull that graphic back up, because that is just astonishing. Here we go. Average Canadian family pays 42% of its income to taxes, more than the necessities of life. And you see there on the green side there, 11% food, 2% clothing, 22% housing. What blows my mind, Franco, and we've been looking at this calculation for a few years now, is that despite the insanely high cost of housing for many people, that the average is still falling onto the side of taxes being more. And these same politicians are the ones who haven't gotten the message that, hey, taxpayers are tapped out. Like, I can't remember the last time that I saw a major urban mayor, for example, in Calgary or Edmonton or something here in Alberta saying, you know what? I don't want these pay raises. I'm going to cut my own pay in half. Or I think that it should be, small business owners and retired teachers and police officers who are doing a stipend in order to come here to city council. No, they just keep on adding more and more layers of government. They're fattening their comm staff layer so they don't have to actually answer questions to the media and to citizens. And they're jacking up their own pay. That's just at the city level. And by the way, they're trying to save the world. I will point that out. They're getting up in everybody's business instead of fixing potholes and keeping the streets clean and safe. They're deciding, who can't hold a concert, for example, in their city. Like, they're deciding to get like big globalists. And we're all paying the tab for it. This is where it really gets me, is that if somebody wants to go on kind of what I said, an ideological vision quest, I don't care, whatever they want to do, but they're making taxpayers pay for it all along the way. And I think it's part of the growing size of government and mission creep that is causing that number to still stay at 42% for various levels of government.
Well, hey, we were piling on Ford there with this corporate welfare, so let's just continue. I mean,
Sure.
Ford and the provincial politicians in Ontario are taking a massive raise.
Right.
And they just had an election. And guess what? I don't remember hearing a single time during that Ontario election Ford talking about giving himself a massive pay raise, or those other provincial politicians, right? Like, I live in Ontario. I don't remember knocks on the door saying, hey, vote for me. I'm going to take more of your money and stuff it into my own pocket. I don't remember having that conversation even once during the Ontario election. Or how about the federal politicians, right? What, April 1, they give themselves a raise every single year. They just took 6 pay raises since the beginning of 2020. All members of parliament, right? 6 pay raises since the beginning of 2020. Gross. You know what else is gross? The massive tax burden paying for all this government waste. Like, the average tax bill, I mentioned 42% now. Well, that has grown more than 2,700% since 1961. Okay? During that time, inflation went up by a little over 900%. So this massive tax bill is growing out of control. And like, what are you getting for this massive growth in government? Here's another stat I like to throw out, okay? The federal bureaucracy, the cost of the federal bureaucracy has gone up more than 70% in the last decade. Are you getting anywhere close to 70% better services from the federal bureaucracy? Well, like, if you're not on the taxpayer payroll, I bet the answer to that question is a big fat no.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to start getting upset about this. I just read about an article about a young man who died waiting in an emergency room. He waited more than 8 hours. Perfectly fit, healthy young man. The family is suing the city. I believe they're suing. They're suing the hospital. I think they're going to sue the province as well. Like, it's one of those things where, exactly to your point, the way you ask yourself, think about all the services, and I use that term loosely, that you get from government. So yeah, people should do that. Imagine for a second, do a thought process. Imagine you're on salary and you get paid like, the average person does every 2 weeks, and it arrives in your bank account. Poof. Imagine that amount of money being double, almost double. What kind of things could you do with that cash? Could you afford better food? Could you save up for a house? Could you pay off that credit card that's haunting you? Could you buy a vehicle? Like, there's so many things you could do to better your life and your lives of those around you if you had more of your own money. But the government takes almost half of it. Now, extra part of the thought process, think of the last time you were waiting in the emergency room. Think of the last time that, you were trying to find a decent place to park where you weren't worried about your car getting smashed and grabbed. Think about having to stand in line at the passport office. Are you getting awesome 70% better gold-plated services from various levels of government? Probably not. So this is why people need to stand up and be heard. Franco, anything that you think people should really zero in on when it comes to advocacy and standing up for themselves? Like, this is what we specialize in, is encouraging people to push back on their various levels of government to say, hey, I don't like spending half my paycheck to various levels of you guys, and I expect better services for this, and quit wasting my money. And by the way, quit telling me what kind of car I need to buy and drive. What should they do?
Well, I mean, always, democracy is a participation sport, right? So, you might say, oh, I don't care about politics, but guess what? Those politicians and bureaucrats sure do care about your wallet and your money. So you have to fight back. You have to stay in the game. Look, one thing that I would say to the audience here is, like, there's going to be a real big fight with the federal government union bosses, right? You hear Carney talk about saving money. Who knows if that's actually going to happen, right? But you already have the government union bosses in Ottawa lighting their hair on fire, pretending to be Chicken Little, yelling the sky will fall if the government finally saves some money. But guess what, folks? Like, they're supposed to be public servants, but like, who is really serving who? Right? Who's really serving who these days? Because, the federal government added 99,000 extra government bureaucrats to the taxpayer payroll in the last decade. Hey, newsflash, folks, the government is not supposed to be a white collar welfare scheme. Okay, so we need cuts, and we need everyone to be pushing back against those greedy government union bosses and being like, no, ordinary Canadians are demanding the federal government to finally cut the fat.
I might just start calling the capital where you live that white collar welfare scheme. It really has a ring to it. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, doing God's work there, stationed in Ottawa. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Kris.
So Franco is absolutely right there. Whether it comes to being able to assemble or the freedom of expression or telling the government to quit taking half of your paycheck, do that vision thing where you're imagining your pay being doubled in your account. It really fires you up. So the best thing to do is to spread the word. So take this show, take this message of pushing for more accountability, of speaking up for yourself, of speaking truth to power, the way our friends on the left used to be able to say, and spread it around to folks who are your friends and family who need to be woken up, who need to be shown that they are getting terrible value and big bossy government for all of their hard work. Thank you so much for watching the Candice Malcolm Show. Be sure to stay with the Candice Malcolm Show and Juno News and follow True North Newswire to find out the latest on fighting for freedom here in Canada.